The Adventure of the Priory School. Although our small stage on Baker Street had witnessed many dramatic entrances and exits, none was as astonishing as the first appearance of Professor, Doctor, and so forth. Thornycroft Huxtable. His visiting card, too small to accommodate all his academic titles, entered the room a second or two before the man himself. Though this large and dignified gentleman seemed the very embodiment of caution and self-control, the moment the door closed behind him he staggered, struck the table, and collapsed onto the bearskin rug that lay upon the floor. We sprang to our feet at once and stood silently watching the great fallen mass before us. It was clear that some tremendous storm had passed over him. Holmes quickly slipped a cushion beneath the man's head and moistened his lips with brandy. His face was deathly pale and deeply lined. The bags beneath his closed eyes had taken on a leaden hue. The corners of his half-open mouth drooped in melancholy, while the beard upon his rounded cheekbones was thick and unkempt. The stains upon his collar and shirt told of long travel, and his untidy hair stood stiffly upon his well-shaped head. That he had met with some grave misfortune was obvious at a glance. "What is it, Watson?" Holmes asked. "Complete exhaustion," I replied, feeling the man's weak, fluttering pulse. "Most likely hunger and fatigue." As Holmes examined a ticket taken from the man's waistcoat pocket, he remarked, "A return ticket from Mackleton in the north of England. And as it is not yet noon, we may infer that he is something of an early riser." The man's wrinkled eyelids began to twitch, and presently a pair of gray eyes stared vacantly up at us. Soon after, he struggled to his feet, his face flushing with embarrassment. "Pray forgive my weakness, Mr. Holmes. I appear to have overtaxed myself." "Thank you. A glass of milk and a biscuit will set me right. I came here in person, Mr. Holmes, to make certain that you would accompany me. A telegram could never have conveyed the urgency of the matter. When you have recovered somewhat—" "I'm quite well, quite well. How feeble I have become. I must ask you to come with me to Mackleton on the very next train, Mr. Holmes." My friend shook his head slowly. "My colleague, Dr. Watson, can explain how occupied we are at present. I am engaged with the Ferrers documents, and the Abergavenny murder is shortly to come to trial. Only a matter of life and death could draw me away from London." Spreading his arms, the man exclaimed, "Then you are seeking a matter of life and death, are you not? Have you not heard that the only son of the Duke of Holderness has been kidnapped?" "What? The former cabinet minister?" "The very same. We have tried desperately to keep it from the press, but some rumors appeared in last night's edition of the Globe. I assumed you might already have heard." Holmes stretched out his long arm and took down an encyclopedia marked with the letter H. "Holderness, 6th Duke, KG, PC, half the alphabet, Baron Beverley, Earl of Carston. Good heavens, what a catalogue! Member for Hallamshire since 1900. Married in 1888 to Edith, daughter of Sir Charles Appledore. One child and heir, Lord Saltire. Estates covering 250,000 acres. Mines in Lancashire and Wales. Address, Carlton House Terrace, Holderness Hall, Hallamshire, Carston Estate, Bangor, Wales. Appointed Under-Secretary for the Navy in 1872. Later Foreign Secretary. Indeed, one of the most powerful men in the country. And the most important. And probably the wealthiest. I know how devoted you are to your work, and how you take satisfaction in it for its own sake. But you should know that His Grace has offered £5,000 to anyone who can reveal his son's whereabouts, and an additional 1,000 to whoever can name the person or persons responsible." "A remarkable offer," said Holmes. "Watson, I believe we must head north with Dr. Huxtable. And if, after finishing your milk, you would kindly tell us what happened, when it happened, how it happened, And finally, what connection you, as Dr. Thornycroft Huxtable of the Priory School, have to the affair, and why, judging by your appearance, you waited 3 days before seeking my humble assistance? I should be most obliged." Once our visitor had finished his milk and biscuit, color returned to his face and clarity to his eyes. In a steady and lucid manner, he began his account. "The Priory School, of which I am founder and headmaster, is a private college. The phrase, the Huxtable Lights, may perhaps be familiar to you. It is without question one of the finest and most exclusive schools in England. The Earl of Blackwater, Lord Leverstoke, and Sir Cathcart Soames are among those who have entrusted their sons to me. But when, 3 weeks ago, the Duke of Holderness sent his secretary, Mr. James Wilder, to suggest that I take charge of his 10-year-old son, Lord Saltire, I felt that my institution had reached its pinnacle. Never did I imagine that it would prove the prelude to the greatest disaster of my life. The boy arrived on the 1st of May at the beginning of the summer term. He was a pleasant child and adapted quickly. I hesitate to speak ill, but in our present circumstances there is little point in secrecy. Lord Saltire was not happy at home. It is common knowledge that the Duke's marriage was an unhappy one, and that the Duchess, following an amicable separation, had settled in the south of France. This separation was quite recent. The boy was deeply attached to his mother, and her departure from Holderness Hall distressed him greatly. That, indeed, was the reason the Duke sent him to my school. Within a fortnight he had settled in well and seemed genuinely content. He was last seen on the night of Monday, the 13th of May. His room is on the 2nd floor and is reached through a larger dormitory shared by 2 other boys. As neither heard nor saw anything, it is certain that young Saltire did not leave through the door. His window was open, and before it runs a thick creeper reaching to the ground. Though we found no footprints, there is no other possible exit. On Tuesday morning at 7 o'clock, he was discovered missing. He had slept in his bed and had put on a school uniform, a black jacket and dark gray trousers, before leaving. There was no sign of an intruder, and had there been a struggle or a cry, it must have been heard, for the senior boy, Caunter, who slept in the inner room, is an exceedingly light sleeper. When I realized Lord Saltire had vanished, I immediately gathered everyone, students, staff, and servants. It was then that we discovered he had not gone alone. The German master, Heidegger, was also missing. His room is likewise on the 2nd floor at the corner, overlooking the same path as Lord Saltire's. He too had slept in his bed, but had apparently left without properly dressing, for his shirt and socks were left behind. We are certain he descended by the creeper, as footprints were found upon the lawn. His bicycle, which he kept in a small shed nearby, was also gone. He had been in my employ for 2 years. Though a sour and unpopular man among both pupils and masters, his references were impeccable. We found no further trace of the fugitives, and now, on this Thursday, we know no more than we did on Tuesday. At first we thought the boy, seized by sudden homesickness, had gone to Holderness Hall, but he was not there. Upon hearing the news, His Grace was plunged into the deepest anxiety. As for myself, you have seen with your own eyes the strain endured by a man responsible for a child whose fate is unknown. Mr. Holmes, I beg you to do everything in your power. I cannot imagine a better opportunity for you to employ your extraordinary abilities. Sherlock Holmes listened with the closest attention. The furrow of his brow and the tension of his features showed that no further encouragement was needed to engage his interest. His passion for the strange and intricate was more than sufficient. He took out his notebook and made a few brief entries. "You have made a grave mistake in delaying so long," he said sharply. "You have placed me at a disadvantage. A trained observer would surely have found something of value in that creeper and lawn. This was not my doing, Mr. Holmes. His Grace is terrified of scandal. He does not wish the public to learn of family discord. Exactly. He dreads having such troubles exposed. But an official investigation was begun. Yes, but nothing came of it. There was a report of a man and a child leaving by the first train from a nearby station. That lead was followed, and they were apprehended in Liverpool last night, but they proved to be entirely unconnected with us. After a sleepless night of despair and disappointment, I boarded a train and came straight to you. I presume that after this false lead, the local investigation was relaxed, abandoned entirely. Then 3 precious days have been utterly wasted. The handling of this affair has been most incompetent. I fully agree. Still, the problem does not appear insoluble. I shall be glad to take the case. Have you discovered any connection between the missing boy and the German master? None. Did the man teach him? No. And to my knowledge, they had never exchanged so much as a single word. Most remarkable. Did the boy own a bicycle? No. Then have you been able to identify any other missing bicycle? No. Are you quite certain? Absolutely. You do not seriously suppose that the German master carried the child in his arms through the darkness of night and fled on his bicycle, do you? Of course not. Then how do you suppose the affair was carried out? He may have used the bicycle as a decoy. Perhaps he hid it somewhere nearby and they proceeded on foot. Perhaps. But would that not be a most clumsy deception? Were there other bicycles where the German master kept his? Yes, there were many. Then if they wished to give the impression of flight by bicycle, would it not have been necessary to conceal 2 bicycles rather than 1? You are quite right. Of course I am. Your decoy theory is unsound. Still, we shall treat the bicycle as our point of departure, for a bicycle is not so easily hidden or destroyed. One further question. Did anyone visit the boy on the day before his disappearance? No. Did he receive any letters? Yes, one. From whom? From his father. Do you open the student's letters? No. Then how do you know it was from the Duke? The envelope bore his crest, and the handwriting was the Duke's unmistakable, firm script. Besides, His Grace remembers writing such a letter. Had the boy received any other letters in the days before? None in the last few days. Any from France? No, none at all. You see the direction of my questions. Either the child was taken by force, or he left of his own accord. If he went willingly, some external influence must have urged him to do so. Since no visitor came, he could only have been persuaded by a letter. That is why I am anxious to know with whom he corresponded. I fear I can be of little help there, for as far as I know, he wrote only to his father, and on the very day he vanished, he received a letter from that father. Were the relations between father and son close? Affectionate. His Grace is not affectionate with anyone. He is perpetually occupied with affairs of state and has little patience for ordinary emotions. Still, in his own way, he always treated his son well. And yet the boy was devoted to his mother, was he not? That is true. Did the boy himself tell you this? No. Then did the Duke? My God, is that even possible? Then how did you know? I spoke privately with the Duke's secretary, Mr. James Wilder. He informed me of Lord Salter's feelings. I see. And the Duke's last letter, was it found in the boy's room? No, he took it with him when he left. I believe we should now make our way to Euston, Mr. Holmes. I shall have a carriage called. We shall be ready in 15 minutes. If you're sending any telegrams, Dr. Huxtable, it would be wise to give the impression that the investigation near Liverpool is still active. Let people believe attention remains focused there while we quietly pursue our work on the spot. The scent may yet be fresh enough for Watson and me, 2 old hounds, to follow. That evening we breathed the cold, bracing air of the peak countryside where Dr. Huxtable's celebrated school stood. Night had already fallen when we arrived, and a card lay upon the table. As the butler whispered something into Dr. Huxtable's ear, every line of the man's face tightened with anxiety. "The Duke is here," he said. "He is in my study with Mr. Wilder. Come, I shall introduce you." I had seen photographs of the distinguished statesman before, yet the man himself differed greatly from them. He was tall and severe in appearance, with a narrow, tightly drawn face and a long nose curiously bent at the tip. His corpse-like pallor stood in stark contrast to the brilliant red beard that flowed down over his white waistcoat, from which a gleaming watch chain hung. Such was the figure of the seasoned politician as he stood rigidly before the fireplace, his fixed gaze upon us. At his side stood a remarkably young man whom I took to be his private secretary, Wilder, a small, nervous fellow with restless features and pale blue eyes. It was he who opened the conversation without preamble. "I arrived this morning, Dr. Huxtable, but too late to prevent your journey to London. I have since learned that your purpose was to secure the services of Mr. Sherlock Holmes. Such a step, taken without consultation, surprised His Grace. When I learned that the police had failed, His Grace does not consider the police to have failed. But Mr. Wilder, you are aware, Dr. Huxtable, of the extraordinary efforts His Grace has made to prevent scandal. He prefers that as few people as possible be acquainted with this matter. It would not be difficult to correct the mistake," said the frightened doctor. "Mr. Sherlock Holmes could return to London by the morning train." "I think not, Doctor." "Most decidedly not," said Holmes in his mildest tone. "This northern air is invigorating. I should like to breathe it for a few days and occupy my mind with something stimulating. Whether I do so under your roof or at the village inn is, of course, entirely for you to decide." I could see the poor doctor wavering helplessly when the Duke's ringing voice, like a dinner bell, rescued him from indecision. "I agree with Mr. Wilder that you erred in not consulting me, Dr. Huxtable. However, since Mr. Sherlock Holmes is already in possession of our secret, it would be absurd not to avail ourselves of his services. I shall be delighted if you will be my guest at Holderness Hall rather than take lodgings at the village inn, Mr. Holmes. I thank your Grace for the invitation, but for the purposes of my investigation, it would be more advantageous to remain at the scene of this mysterious occurrence." "As you wish, Mr. Holmes. Should Mr. Wilder or I be able to provide any information, do not hesitate to consult us." "I shall likely need to visit the hall," said Holmes. "For the moment, however, there is only one question I wish to ask. Have you any explanation yourself for your son's disappearance?" "None, unfortunately. I regret to trouble you further, but I fear I have no alternative. Could the Duchess have any connection with this affair?" The minister's hesitation was plainly written upon his face. "I think not," he said at last. "Another possible explanation is abduction for ransom. Have you received any such demand?" "No." "One more question, Your Grace. I believe you wrote to your son on the day of his disappearance." "No, I wrote the day before." "True, but the letter reached your son on that very day." "Yes." "Was there anything in its contents that might have unsettled the boy or driven him to such an act?" "No, sir. Most certainly not. Did you yourself post the letter?" Before the nobleman could reply, his secretary interjected with faint irritation. "It is not His Grace's habit to post his own letters," he said. The letter to his son lay upon the desk with the others. I myself placed them in the mailbag. "Are you certain that this particular letter was among them?" "Yes. I saw it there with my own eyes." "How many letters did you write that day?" "Some 20 or 30. I have a great deal of correspondence, but I fail to see how that concerns us." "Hardly at all," said Holmes. "For my own part, The Duke continued. I advise the police to concentrate their attention on the south of France. I've already said that I do not believe the Duchess capable of such a monstrous act, but young people are unpredictable. The boy may have fled to his mother with the encouragement and assistance of the German master. I believe I must now return to my estate, Dr. Huxtable. I could sense that Holmes had further questions he wished to ask, but the Duke's abrupt manner made it clear that the conversation was at an end. For an aristocrat of his stature, discussing private family matters with a stranger was plainly distasteful. It was equally clear that he feared each new question might bring to light some shadowed corner of his family history. Once the Duke and his secretary had departed, my friend Holmes set about his investigation with his customary energy. He examined the boy's room in the minutest detail, yet reached only the conclusion that escape through the window was the sole possibility. His inspection of the German master's room yielded no direct clue either, though he noticed that one of the creepers had snapped under the man's weight. By the light of a lantern, we could also make out the spot where his foot had pressed into the lawn. This was the only trace left behind on the short green grass after that inexplicable nocturnal flight. Sherlock Holmes left the house alone and did not return until after 11 o'clock. He had procured a large military map of the surrounding district. Spreading the great sheet across his bed, he placed the lamp at its center. As he studied the map and smoked his pipe, he would now and then use the stem to indicate spots that had caught his attention. I am beginning to enjoy this case, Watson, he said. Certain aspects of it are genuinely intriguing. I want you to pay close attention to these geographical features, which may prove relevant at this early stage. Look at this map. This black square marks the Priory School. I'll put a pin there. This line represents the main road. You see how it runs east to west past the school. And you'll notice that for nearly a mile on either side, there are no side roads branching off. If those two traveled by road at all, they must have taken this one. Undoubtedly, by a fortunate coincidence, we are able to determine who passed along that road during the night in question. Here, where I rest my pipe, there was a policeman on duty from midnight until 6 in the morning. This is the first junction to the east. He swears he never left his post for a moment and that he could not possibly have failed to notice a man or a child passing by. From my conversation with him tonight, I am convinced he is entirely reliable. They cannot have gone east. Let's consider the other direction. To the west stands an inn called the Red Bull. The landlord was ill, and his wife sent for a doctor from Mackleton that night. The doctor, however, was detained with another patient and did not arrive until morning. The people at the inn remained alert throughout the night, watching the road for the doctor's arrival. They insist that no one passed. If their testimony is trustworthy, then the fugitives neither went west nor used the road at all. But what about the bicycle? I objected. You are right. We shall come to the bicycle presently. If we continue our reasoning, it follows that if they did not take the road, they must have crossed the open country either to the north or to the south of the house. Of that we can be certain. Let's weigh these two possibilities. To the south, as you see here, lies a wide tract of arable land divided into small fields by stone walls. I agree that a bicycle could not have been ridden there. We may eliminate that option. We must therefore examine the northern moors. Here is a small wood called Ragged Shaw, and beyond it the moor known as Lower Gilmore. It stretches for 16 kilometers and rises gently uphill. Holderness Hall lies upon this stretch of land. By road the distance is 16 kilometers, but across the moor it is scarcely 10. It is a desolate region. Aside from a few small plots where farmers keep sheep and cattle, you will see nothing but plovers and woodcock as far as the Chesterfield Road. Here you see a church, a handful of cottages, and an inn. Beyond that, the hills grow steeper. We must investigate the north. But the bicycle, I persisted. Faced with my insistence, Holmes replied with a trace of impatience. A skilled cyclist has no need of roads. There are tracks across the moor. And remember, the moon was full that night. Hello. What is this? There was an urgent knock at the door. A moment later, Dr. Huxtable burst into the room, holding a blue cricket cap with a white band around its peak. At last, we have a clue, he cried. Thank God. We have finally found a trace of our poor student. This is his cap. Where was it found? In the caravan of some gypsies camping on the moor. They left here on Tuesday. The police caught up with them today, searched the caravan, and discovered this. And what explanation did they give? They stammered and lied. They claimed they found the cap on the moor on Tuesday morning. Those rogues know where Lord Saltire is. Thankfully, they are now under arrest. They cannot escape. Fear of the law or the Duke's generosity will surely loosen their tongues. That is something, Holmes remarked after the doctor had left. At least it confirms our suspicion that something may be found in the direction of Lower Gilmore. Beyond arresting the gypsies, the local police appear to have done very little. Look here, Watson. A stream runs across the moor. According to the map, it widens in places and becomes marshy, particularly between Holderness Hall and the school. In this dry weather, searching elsewhere would be futile. But here we may yet find tracks. We shall go there at first light. We may uncover something that sheds at least a little light upon this mystery. The sun had only just risen when I awoke to find Holmes standing beside my bed, tall and gaunt as ever. He was fully dressed and bore the look of a man who had already been out and returned. I've examined the lawn and the bicycle shed, he said, and taken a walk through Ragged Shaw. Come, Watson, your cocoa awaits you in the next room. Make haste. Today will be an important one. His eyes shone like those of a craftsman absorbed in his work. His cheeks were flushed with excitement. He was utterly transformed from the pale, withdrawn Holmes of Baker Street into a figure of energy and resolve. From the taut, coiled stance of his body, I sensed that a long and arduous day lay before us. We began, however, with a bitter disappointment. We crossed a stretch of moorland covered in thousands of sheep tracks until we reached the green strip marking the marsh that lay between us and Holderness Hall. If the boy had been heading home, he must have passed this way. Such wet ground could not be crossed without leaving traces. Yet there was not a sign of either the child or the German master. Holmes paced grimly along the edge of the marsh, examining every muddy impression upon its moss-covered surface. Apart from countless sheep tracks, there were only cattle prints a mile and a half farther down. That was all. We have checked the first point, he said, gazing sadly across the flat expanse before us. Down there lies another marsh with a narrow passage between them. Hello, hello, what is this? We had come upon a small black ribbon lying upon the path. Across its damp surface ran the clear imprint of a bicycle wheel. Hurrah! I cried. We have found it at last. But Holmes shook his head slowly. There was no triumph in his expression, only surprise and expectation. There is no doubt that this is the track of a bicycle, he said, but it is not the bicycle we seek. I can recognize 42 different tire patterns. This one, as you can see, belongs to a Dunlop tire with an outer patch. Heidegger's tires were Palmer make, with long longitudinal grooves. The mathematics master, Aveling, was quite certain of the brand of Heidegger's bicycle. This, therefore, cannot be his. Then might it not be the boy's bicycle? If we knew that the boy had a bicycle, we might say so, but unfortunately we do not. This track must have been left by a bicycle traveling from the direction of the school. Perhaps it was heading toward the school. No, my dear Watson. The rear wheel, which bears the rider's weight, leaves the deeper impression. In many places, you can see how it has partially obliterated the track of the front wheel. The bicycle was most certainly traveling away from the school. This track may or may not be connected with our case, but before we go any farther, we shall follow it back. As Holmes suggested, we traced the bicycle track backward, but after a few hundred meters, the damp ground ended and the track vanished. Still, by continuing in the direction from which it must have come, we encountered a thin stream. There the track reappeared faintly, though it was now scarcely distinguishable among the cattle prints. Beyond that point, it disappeared altogether, but the path itself led straight toward the small wood behind the school, known as Ragged Shaw. The bicycle must have emerged from that grove. Holmes seated himself upon a rock and rested his chin in his hands. He remained perfectly motionless, and by the time he stirred again, I had finished 2 cigarettes. "Very well," he said at last. "A cunning man might well think of changing his bicycle tires in order to leave behind a different trail. I should take pride in pursuing such a criminal. But for the moment we must set that question aside and return to the marsh, for we have by no means examined the whole of it. We continued our systematic search of the wet patches scattered across the moor. Before long, our perseverance was rewarded. A muddy track ran along the lower edge of the marsh, and as we approached it, Holmes let out a cry of triumph. Down the center of the path ran a series of fine, wire-like impressions, unmistakable as the tracks of a Palmer tire. "This must be her Heidegger," Holmes shouted excitedly. "It seems my reasoning was sound after all, Watson. I congratulate you, but there is still much ground to cover. Keep off the path, please. Let us follow this track, but I fear it will not carry us far." As we pursued it, we noticed that the ground in this part of the moor was soft in places, and although the wheel track frequently vanished, it reappeared again and again. "Do you observe how the cyclist increased his speed?" Holmes asked. "There can be no doubt of it. Look at this imprint. Both tires have cut equally deep into the ground. That can only happen when the rider leans forward over the handlebars and pedals with all his strength. Good heavens, the man has fallen." For several yards, the track spread out in a broad, irregular smear. A few footprints were visible beyond it, after which the tire marks resumed. "He must have slipped," I said. Holmes stooped and picked up a branch of blackthorn, its blossoms already wilted. When I saw that the yellow flowers were stained a deep crimson, I felt a chill of horror. There were clotted bloodstains upon the path and among the heather as well. "This is serious," said Holmes. "Keep back, Watson. Do not take a single unnecessary step. What does it tell us?" The man fell and was injured, rose to his feet, mounted his bicycle again, and rode on. Yet there are no other tracks. On this side of the path, there are cattle prints. He was not gored by a bull. That is impossible, but there is no other explanation visible. We must go on, Watson. With tire tracks and blood to guide us, the man cannot escape us now. Our pursuit did not last long. Before long, the tire marks began to zigzag strangely across the damp, shining ground. Suddenly, as I glanced ahead, I caught the glint of metal among the dense blackthorn bushes. Dragging the bicycle free, we saw that its tires were indeed Palmer make, and that one of the pedals was bent. The front of the bicycle was smeared with blood. On the far side of the bushes lay a shoe. When we ran around to it, we found the unfortunate cyclist lying upon the ground. He was a tall, bearded man with spectacles, one lens of which had fallen out. He had died from a blow that had shattered part of his skull. That he had been able to travel so far after receiving such an injury spoke volumes for his strength and determination. He had put on his shoes without socks. His jacket stood open, and beneath it his nightclothes were visible. There was no doubt whatever that the body was that of the German master, Heidegger. Holmes turned the body with great care and respect, examining it closely. He then stood for some time lost in thought. From a furrow in his brow, it was clear that he did not believe this grim discovery to have advanced our investigation in any significant way. "I find myself in some difficulty," he said at last. "I am inclined to continue the investigation, for we have already lost so much time that I cannot afford to waste even an hour more. On the other hand, we must inform the police that Heidegger's body has been found, so that the proper steps may be taken. I can go and tell them, but I need you with me. Your help is essential. Wait, there's a man cutting peat over there. Bring him here and have him notify the police." I fetched the villager and led him to the body. Holmes handed the frightened man a note and instructed him to take it to Dr. Huxtable. "Yes, Watson," he continued. "This morning we have uncovered 2 clues. The first is the bicycle with Palmer tires. We now know where that trail leads. The second is another bicycle fitted with patched Dunlop tires. Before we begin tracing the second, let us review what we already possess and make the fullest possible use of it, while taking care not to confuse essentials with irrelevancies. First and foremost, we must establish that the boy left of his own free will. He climbed out through his window and departed, either alone or with someone else. Of that we are certain." I agreed with his assessment. "Now, consider the unfortunate German master. The boy was fully dressed when he fled, which shows he had planned his action. Heidegger, on the other hand, left without even putting on his socks, proof of a sudden, impulsive decision." "Exactly. Why did he go?" "Because he saw the boy escaping through the window and wished to catch him and bring him back. He mounted his bicycle at once and set off in pursuit, but it proved to be his death. So it would seem. Now we come to the most critical point. A grown man pursuing a child would ordinarily give chase on foot, confident that he could easily overtake him. Yet Heidegger chose instead to take his bicycle. He would never have done so unless he had seen that the child possessed some means of rapid escape. Another bicycle. Precisely. Let's continue to reconstruct the scene. The German master died 8 kilometers from the school, and note this well. He was not killed by a blow such as a child might deliver with a stone or stick, but by one that could only have been struck by a powerful arm. Therefore, the child was not alone. Someone was with him. Moreover, they must have been moving swiftly, for even an experienced cyclist did not catch them until 8 kilometers had passed. We examined the place where the man fell. What did we find? Only cattle tracks. I searched the area thoroughly, and within a radius of 50 meters, there was no other path. The murder could not have been committed by another cyclist. There were no human footprints either. "This is impossible, Holmes," I exclaimed. "Excellent," he replied. "A most illuminating observation. Since it is impossible for events to have unfolded as I have described, then I must have made an error somewhere. Yet you were with me throughout. Did we make a mistake? Could the man's skull not have been fractured by the fall? On marshy ground, I can think of nothing else. This case defies all reason. Do not tempt fate by saying so. We have solved harder cases than this. We possess a wealth of material. All that remains is to use it correctly. Come, since we have followed the Palmer tire to its end, let us now see what the patched Dunlop will reveal." We began tracing the track of the Dunlop tire, but before long, dense bushes rose before us like a wall, while the stream lay behind. There was no longer any trail to follow. From the point where we last saw the Dunlop track, it might have led either toward Holderness Hall, whose imposing towers lay several kilometers to our left, or toward the gray village on the Chesterfield Road that stretched across the low ground ahead. As we approached a neglected and forbidding inn, above whose door hung the painted sign of a fighting cock, Holmes suddenly cried out in pain and clutched my shoulder to keep from falling. He had badly twisted his ankle. Limping with difficulty, he managed to reach the door. A swarthy, thick-set, elderly man sat there, puffing at a porcelain pipe. "How do you do, Mr. Reuben Hayes?" Holmes asked. "Who are you? And how do you know my name?" The villager replied, his crafty eyes lighting up at once. "It is written on your signboard. A proprietor makes himself known at a glance. You have no carriage in your stable, I take it?" "No, I have no carriage. I cannot put any weight on my foot." "Then don't." "But if I don't, I cannot walk." "Then hop." Though there was not a trace of courtesy or humanity in Mr. Reuben Hayes's manner, Holmes never for a moment abandoned his own politeness. "Look here, I am truly in a difficult position. I do not know how I am to get on." "I don't know either," said the surly innkeeper. "This is a matter of great importance. If you will allow me the use of your bicycle, I shall give you a gold coin." The man's ears pricked up at once. "Where are you going?" "To Holderness Hall." "You're the Duke's men, are you?" he said, casting a mocking glance at our mud-splattered clothes. Holmes merely smiled politely. "He will be pleased to see us." "Why is that?" "Because we bring news of his missing son." The innkeeper could not conceal his surprise. "So you've been following the boy's trail?" "He has been sighted in Liverpool. His discovery is only a matter of time." The man's unshaven, severe face altered once again. His manner softened abruptly. "I've no reason to wish the Duke well," he said. "I was once his chief coachman. He treated me cruelly and dismissed me on the word of a lying grain merchant. Still, I would wish him to have news of his son. So the boy is in Liverpool, is he? I will help you deliver the message." "Thank you," said Holmes. "First, let us eat, and then you can lend us the bicycle." "I don't have a bicycle." Holmes displayed the gold coin. "I told you, I have no bicycle. I can give you 2 horses to take you as far as the hall, though." "Very well," said Holmes. "Let us eat first." Once we were alone in the stone-floored kitchen, Holmes's ankle recovered with remarkable suddenness. It was already near nightfall, and we had eaten nothing since early morning. Being ravenously hungry, we lingered over our meal. Holmes fell deep into thought and several times crossed to the window, peering out with keen interest. The window overlooked a neglected yard. At the far end stood a smithy, where a young man, blackened with grime, was at work. The stables lay opposite the forge. Holmes had crossed the room yet again when he suddenly sprang up with a cry. "Thank God, Watson! I believe I have it." Yes, it must be so." "Watson, do you recall seeing cattle tracks this morning?" "Yes, we saw several." "Where precisely?" "Everywhere. In the marsh, on the path, and where poor Heidegger died." "Exactly. Now tell me, how many cattle did you see on the moor itself?" "I don't recall seeing any cattle at all. And there lies the oddity, Watson. Tracks everywhere, yet not a single cow to be found. Do you not find that peculiar?" "Very much so." "Now strain your memory. Can you picture the tracks on the path?" "Yes." "Do you recall that sometimes they appeared like this?" He arranged crumbs upon the table. "And sometimes like this, and occasionally even so. Do you remember?" "No, I cannot say that I do." "Ido, I would swear to it, and we can verify it any time we please." How blind I was. I ought to have understood it at once. Understood what? A cow that walks, trots, and gallops by turns. Does that not strike you as extraordinary? Such a deception is beyond the wit of a mere innkeeper. Apart from that boy in the forge, the place seems deserted. Come, we must take a look around quietly. Inside the dilapidated stable stood 2 horses, their coats matted from neglect. Holmes lifted the hind leg of one and burst out laughing. "The shoes are old, but newly fitted. Old shoes, new nails. This case deserve a place among the classics. Now, let us look at the forge." The blacksmith continued working, paying us no heed. I could see that Holmes's eyes were searching among the scattered scraps of iron and wood upon the ground. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind us. The innkeeper stood there, brows drawn low, his dark face contorted with rage. He advanced upon us brandishing a short iron-tipped club. Knowing my revolver lay in my pocket was a comfort. "Damn spies!" he shouted. "What are you doing here?" "Why so, Mr. Reuben Hayes?" Holmes replied calmly. "Anyone seeing you might think you had something to hide." The man forced a smile upon himself, though his grin was more threatening than his scowl. "What do you expect to find in a forge?" he said. "But I don't care for people poking about my property without permission. You'd best settle your bill and be on your way." "No trouble at all, Mr. Hayes. We meant no harm," said Holmes. "We only wish to look at the horses, but perhaps it would be best if we left. It's not far, is it? The hall is no more than 3 kilometers. Keep to the left." He spoke no further until we left the inn, but his angry eyes never left us. We had not gone far when, the moment we passed out of his sight, Holmes stopped abruptly. "I felt safe in the inn," he said. "With every step away from it, I feel less so. No, I cannot leave yet. I am convinced this Reuben Hayes knows everything," I said. "I have never seen treachery so plainly written on a man's face." "So he gave you that impression as well? Horses, a forge, and an inn. It is a most interesting establishment, this Fighting Cock. It would be wise to observe it once more, unseen." Ahead of us rose a sloping hillside dotted with gray limestone rocks. We had left the road and were climbing when I glanced toward Holderness Hall and saw a cyclist racing toward us at full speed. "Down, Watson!" Holmes hissed, gripping my shoulder. We had barely ducked when the man flew past along the path beside us. Through the cloud of dust, I caught a glimpse of his pale, anxious face, every feature tightened with terror, mouth agape, eyes staring wildly ahead. He resembled a grotesque caricature of the elegant James Wilder we had met the night before. "The Duke's secretary," cried Holmes. "Come, Watson, let us see what he intends." After scrambling over several rocks, we reached a vantage point from which the front door of the inn was visible. Wilder's bicycle stood propped against the wall beside it. No movement could be seen inside, nor did any face appear at the windows. The sun was setting behind the high towers of Holderness Hall, and dusk slowly gathered. Soon we saw the lamps of a carriage light up in the courtyard, followed by the sound of hoofs. The carriage set off at a gallop toward Chesterfield. "What do you make of that?" Holmes whispered. "Someone is fleeing, so it seems. Only one person left in a light carriage. It cannot have been Mr. James Wilder. He is still at the door." In the fading light, we could make out the secretary's silhouette framed by the reddish doorway. He leaned forward, peering into the darkness, clearly waiting for someone. At last, footsteps approached. For a brief moment, a second figure appeared in the light. Then the door closed, and the building sank back into darkness. 5 minutes later, a light appeared in a room on the upper floor. "The Fighting Cock seems to keep unusual hours," Holmes murmured. "The bar is on the other side." "Indeed. These must be special guests. What is Mr. James Wilder doing in this den at such an hour? And who was his visitor? Come, Watson, we must investigate more closely, even at some risk." We crept silently down the slope and crawled toward the door. The bicycle still rested against the wall. Holmes struck a match and held it to the rear wheel. When the patched Dunlop tire glowed in the brief light, I heard my friend chuckle softly. The illuminated room was directly above us. "I must look inside, Watson. Brace yourself against the wall so I can see." Holmes's feet had barely touched my shoulder before he was down again. "Come, my dear fellow," he said. "We have done enough work for today. I believe we now know all that can be known. We have a long walk back to the school. The sooner we set off, the better. Throughout that long and exhausting journey, he did not utter a single word. Upon reaching the school, he did not enter but continued straight on to Mackleton Station to send a telegram. I later heard that he spent the night comforting the shattered Dr. Huxtable over the death of one of his masters. Then, with the same energy and alertness he had shown that morning, he came to my room. "All is well, my friend," he said. "I promise you that before tomorrow evening this mystery shall be solved." The next morning at 11 o'clock, we were walking along the famous U-lined avenue leading to Holderness Hall. Passing through the magnificent Elizabethan entrance, we were shown into the Duke's study. We found Mr. James Wilder waiting for us, composed and courteous as ever, though the horror of the previous night was still visible in his darting eyes and twitching features. "Have you come to see his grace? I fear he is far from well. The terrible news has shaken him deeply. Yesterday afternoon, Dr. Huxtable informed us by telegram of what you found on the moor." "I must see the Duke, Mr. Wilder. He has not left his room." "Then I shall go to his room. I believe he is resting." "Then I shall see him in bed." Holmes's cold, uncompromising tone made it clear that resistance was futile. "Very well, Mr. Holmes. I shall inform him that you are waiting." After a delay of half an hour, the aristocratic statesman stood before us. He was paler than ever, his shoulders stooped, as though he had aged years since the previous morning. Greeting us with the courtesy befitting his station, he seated himself at his desk. His red beard spilled across its surface. "Proceed, Mr. Holmes," he said. Holmes never took his eyes from the secretary standing beside the Duke. "I think I would speak more freely without Mr. Wilder present, Your Grace." The Duke's face drained of yet more color as he shot Holmes a hostile glance. "If His Grace wishes." Yes, you may leave us. Now then, Mr. Holmes, what is it?" My friend waited until the secretary had departed and closed the door. "The matter is this, Your Grace," said Holmes. "Dr. Huxtable informed us that a reward had been offered in this case. I wish to confirm it from your own lips." "Dr. Huxtable spoke correctly, Mr. Holmes. If I am not mistaken, you have offered £5,000 to whoever reveals your son's whereabouts." "That is correct. And an additional £1,000 to anyone who identifies the person or persons who detained him." "That is correct. And your second promise applies not only to those who abducted your son, but also to anyone who is complicit in keeping him where he is at present. Does it not?" Yes. The Duke broke in impatiently. "If you do your work well, you will find me exceedingly generous." To see my friend rubbing his thin hands together with what appeared to be avarice astonished me, for I knew him to be anything but greedy. "I believe I see Your Grace's checkbook upon the desk," said Holmes. "I should be obliged if you would write me a check for £6,000. I bank with the Capital and Counties Bank, Oxford Street branch." The Duke sat bolt upright in his chair, staring at Holmes without the slightest movement. "Are you jesting, Mr. Holmes? If so, I must tell you that it is not amusing." "No, Your Grace. I have never been more serious in my life." "Then what do you mean by this?" "I mean that I have earned the reward. I know where your son is, and I know the names of at least some of those who have detained him." The Duke's face, pale already, drained of what little color remained, making his red beard appear even more vivid. "Where is he?" he asked hoarsely. "At the Fighting Cock Inn, 3 kilometers from the gates of your estate. At least he was there last night." The Duke collapsed back into his chair. "And whom do you accuse?" Sherlock Holmes's reply was startling indeed. He stepped swiftly forward and laid a hand upon the Duke's shoulder. "I accuse you," he said. "And now, if you please, I will take that check, Your Grace." I shall never forget the way he sprang to his feet, clawing at the air as though falling into an abyss. Then, by a remarkable effort of aristocratic self-command, he sank back into his chair and buried his head in his hands. It took him some time before he could speak. At last, without lifting his head, he asked, "How much do you know?" "I saw you together last night. Does anyone else know besides your friend?" "I have told no one." With trembling fingers, he took up his pen and opened the checkbook. "I shall keep my word, Mr. Holmes. Though I do not like what you have learned, I shall write the check. When I offer that reward, I never imagined matters could take such a turn. But you and your friend are discreet men, are you not?" "I'm not sure I quite follow your grace." "Let me be plainer, Mr. Holmes. If only the two of you know the truth, there is no reason for it to spread further. I believe that would make £12,000 I owe you, would it not?" Holmes merely smiled and shook his head. "I fear the matter cannot be settled so simply, your grace. A schoolmaster has been murdered, and that demands an accounting. But James knew nothing of that. You cannot hold him responsible for such a thing. It was the work of that brutal scoundrel he was foolish enough to employ." "In my opinion," said Holmes calmly, "any man who sets a crime in motion is morally responsible for all the crimes that flow from it, your grace." "Morally, you may be entirely right, Mr. Holmes," replied the Duke. "But the law is another matter. A man cannot be held legally responsible for a crime at which he was not present and which he abhors as much as you do. When James learned what had happened, he came to me in horror and confessed everything. He cut all ties with that villain without a moment's hesitation. Ah, Mr. Holmes, you must save him. You must save him, I tell you." The Duke had abandoned all attempts at composure and now paced the room, fists clenched, his expression wild. At last he mastered himself and returned to his desk. "That you came straight here without telling anyone is greatly to your credit," he said. "At least we may now discuss how to weather this dreadful scandal with the least possible damage." "Quite so," said Holmes. "But that can only be done through complete and absolute honesty, your grace. I am ready to help you in every way, but only if I know every detail. As I understand it, you say that Mr. James Wilder was not the killer." "That is correct. The killer escaped." A grave smile crossed Holmes's face. "Then your grace has perhaps not heard of my modest reputation, or you would know that escape from me is rarely permanent. Reuben Hayes was arrested in Chesterfield this morning, thanks to information I provided last night. I received confirmation by telegram from the chief constable before coming here." The Duke leaned back, staring at Holmes in amazement. "You seem almost superhuman," he said. "So Hayes has been caught. If that will not harm James's prospects, I am glad to hear it." "Your secretary, you mean?" "No, sir, I mean my son." This time, it was Holmes who was taken aback. "I must confess that this is entirely new information to me, your grace. I should be obliged if you would explain yourself more clearly." "I shall conceal nothing. I agree that, in the face of the situation brought about by James's folly and jealousy, full candor is the only course. In my youth, Mr. Holmes, I fell in love with the woman of my life. I proposed marriage, but she refused, saying such a match would ruin my career. Had she lived, I would never have married another. But she died, leaving me a child. For her sake, I cherished that child. Though I could never publicly acknowledge him as my son, I ensured he received the finest education and kept him close to me as he grew to manhood. Yet my son abused my secret and began to threaten me, knowing full well how I dreaded scandal. Indeed, his existence was one of the reasons my marriage knew no peace. Worse still, James bore an ungovernable hatred toward my lawful heir. You may wonder why I kept James at my side under such circumstances. When I looked at him, I saw his mother. For her sake, there was no burden I would not bear. Yet I also feared that he might one day harm Arthur, Lord Saltire. That is why I sent Lord Saltire to Dr. Huxtable's school. James, acting as my agent, dealt with my tenant, that man Hayes. It was evident from the start that he was a scoundrel, yet James somehow grew close to him. He always felt an affinity for coarse people. When James decided to abduct Lord Saltire, it was to this man that he turned for help. You will recall that I wrote to Arthur the day before his disappearance. James opened that letter and added a note of his own, asking Arthur to meet him in the small wood behind the school known as Ragged Shaw. By invoking the Duchess's name, he persuaded the boy to come. That evening, James went by bicycle. This is his account, and told Arthur that his mother longed to see him and was waiting nearby. He said that if Arthur returned to the wood at midnight, a mounted man would take him to her. Poor Arthur fell into the trap. When he returned at midnight, he met the horseman waiting with a pony. Arthur mounted it, and they rode off together. Someone followed them, though James only learned this yesterday, and Hayes struck the pursuer dead with a club. He then brought Arthur to the Fighting Cock Inn, locked him in an upstairs room, and set his wife to guard him. Mrs. Hayes is a good woman, but utterly dominated by her husband. That, Mr. Holmes, was the state of affairs at our first meeting 2 days ago. At that time, I knew no more than you did. You may ask why James undertook such a scheme. His incurable hatred of my lawful heir clouded his judgment. He believed he might yet inherit all my property and despised the social laws that stood in his way. Nor was his plan entirely irrational. He intended to use Arthur as a bargaining chip, to force me to make a will, leaving him everything in exchange for the boy's return. He knew I could not go to the police. Events, however, moved too swiftly, and he never had time to make his demands. Your discovery of Heidegger's body destroyed the plan. When James learned of it, he was seized with terror. Yesterday, while we sat in this very study, Dr. Huxtable's telegram arrived. James's agitation and distress confirmed my suspicions. When I accused him, he confessed everything without resistance and begged me to keep his secret for 3 days so that his accomplice might escape. As always, I yielded to him. I went at once to the Fighting Cock Inn and enabled Hayes to flee. I could not go there by day without attracting gossip, but once night fell, I went to see my Arthur. He was safe and unharmed, though deeply shaken by the horrors he had witnessed. Bound by my promise, I agreed, most reluctantly, to leave him in Mrs. Hayes's care for 3 more days. For if I went to the police, I would be compelled to name the killer, and James would fall with him. You asked for honesty, Mr. Holmes. I have told you everything, without evasion or concealment. Now it is your turn. Will you be equally honest with me? Certainly, Your Grace, said Holmes. First, you must understand that you have placed yourself in serious legal peril. You concealed a crime and aided the escape of a murderer. I have no doubt that the money James Wilder gave his accomplice to flee came from you. The Duke nodded. That alone is grave enough. But your greater offense was leaving your younger son in that den for 3 days. On a promise. Can the promises of such men be trusted? You cannot be certain they would not move him elsewhere. In trying to save your elder son, you exposed the younger to needless danger. That cannot be justified. The proud Duke of Holderness was unaccustomed to such a rebuke in his own study. His face flushed crimson with anger, yet his conscience robbed him of words. I will help you on one condition. You will summon your servant and give him precisely the instructions I dictate. Without a word, the Duke pressed the electric bell. Moments later, the servant appeared. You will be pleased to hear that your young master has been found, said Holmes. His lordship wishes a carriage prepared at once, and Lord Saltire to be brought here immediately from the Fighting Cock Inn. As the servant departed joyfully, Holmes continued, Now that the future is secure, we may be more charitable with the past. I hold no official position, and so long as justice is served, I see no reason to disclose all that I know. Hayes will assuredly hang, and there is nothing to be done for him. What he says in his statement is beyond our control, but I would advise your grace to suggest that silence would serve him best. The police will proceed on a charge of kidnapping for ransom. I see no reason to broaden their view unless they do so themselves. But I must warn you, your grace, that keeping James Wilder at your side will bring you nothing but trouble. I am aware of that, Mr. Holmes. He will leave this country and seek his fortune in Australia. You mentioned that your marriage found no peace because of James Wilder. In that case, I would advise you to attempt a reconciliation with the Duchess and to restore a relationship so unhappily interrupted. I have already done so, Mr. Holmes. I wrote to the Duchess this morning. Then, said Holmes, rising, Watson and I may congratulate ourselves on the many good deeds accomplished by our little journey north. There remains but one small matter. Hayes had his horses shod with shoes shaped like cattle hoofs. Was this ingenious notion suggested to him by Mr. Wilder? The Duke paused, reflecting. His expression showed genuine surprise. Then he opened the door and led us into a large room arranged as a museum. He brought us before a glass case and pointed to an inscription. These horseshoes were recovered from the moat of Holderness Hall. Though forged as horseshoes, their bases were shaped to resemble cattle hooves in order to confuse pursuers. They are believed to have belonged to one of the marauding barons of Holderness in the Middle Ages. Holmes opened the case and ran a moistened finger along the shoe. It was coated with fresh mud. Thank you, he said as he closed it. That was the second most interesting thing I have seen in the North. And the first? I asked. Holmes folded the check and placed it carefully inside his notebook. Stroking the cover, he slipped it into the inner pocket of his coat. I am a poor man, he said,